Hey everybody, welcome to Pop Culture Philosophers. I'm Rockin' Robbie Billups, and it's time for my top 20 comics of 2024. That's right everybody, thanks for checking out the video. I'm Rockin' Robbie Billups. This is my top 20 comics of 2024. It's been a pretty solid year for comics, but out of everything that came out, what are, in my opinion, the best? The ones that are totally worth you taking a look at if you haven't already, and if you have already, to take another look at. Let's get right into it. At number 20, we have Space Ghost from Dynamite Entertainment. So this one's written by David Pepose with artwork by Jonathan Lau, and it absolutely is awesome. It's so freaking good. Dynamite's had a standout year. They've taken on some licensed properties, and they've really done a great job with them. Books like Thundercats, Johnny Quest, Powerpuff Girls. But for me, Space Ghost is at the top of that list. David Pepose is doing a very grounded and brutal and a tragic approach to the Space Ghost property. So this is perfect for old school fans, but it's also good for people that have never had any kind of inclination to read a Space Ghost comic or watch a Space Ghost show or anything like that, right? Even if all you know is Space Ghost Coast to Coast, you can jump right in here and you get involved into the story and the characters. The character work is amazing, the threats are maximized, and the story is rooted in, like I said, a tragic reality. At the same time, though, a very fun and buoyant sense of superhero comics. Jonathan Lau's artwork's pretty solid as well, definitely worth checking out. At number 19, Hate Revisited from Fantagraphics. So Peter Bagge returns to the world of Hate. This was a comic book back in the day in the late 80s, early 90s. I remember reading this when I was first getting into some of the black and white underground alternative comics, especially the ones that Fantagraphics were releasing. So Hate Revisited is revisiting that world, but in the modern day. So Pete Bagge is back doing the artwork himself, but what he's doing is he's telling some untold tales from back in the original series run, and all of those are in black and white like the original series, and then he's telling new stories about our characters today, right? So you get to see how they're grown up, all the things they went through, how they've come apart, how they've come together, different characters, different relationships, different dynamics, and it still has that sense of irreverent fun that I got from the original Hate comic. Plus, all the stuff that's set in the modern era has colors to it too, so it's a nice treat, and even if you didn't read Hate before, I think you can jump in here and appreciate it, and that's something that really made this book stand out. A revisit that's not solely based on nostalgia, but based on the necessity for the existence of the comic. Hate Revisited was splendid. At number 18, Grommets from Image Comics. Grommets is a very authentic slice-of-life comic book set in the 80s, right? It's about these two outcast skateboarder kids, their budding friendship, but also all the trials and tribulations that they face, whether it's trying to be cool, getting away and escaping from the bullies, or trying to get invited to the cute girl's party. It feels very authentic and grounded in a reality, right? So it could have just been a big nostalgia dive, but it's more than that, and that's why I really love this book. Brian Posehn and Rick Remender do a great job with these characters, but I got to give a big highlight to Brett Parsons' artwork. The artwork is very fluid and very expressive, especially with the emoting of the characters. Some would say it's a bit landing on the cartoonish side, but I think that that adds to the appeal of the book. And at the same time, even though it does have this cartoony expressive-ness to it, it still is weighted in the reality of the situation. It's not just a nostalgia dump, even though there are bits of that. Like I really love all of the 80s references. There's a reference to Taco Bell in the 80s. It just took me back, but it's more than that. It's kind of tragic, it's very real, and it's very grounded and filled with nuance. Grommets is a fantastic book. At number 17, Feral from Image Comics. So this one's written by Tony Fleece with artwork from Tone Rodriguez and Trish Forstner. This is like a zombie story, but with cats, right? So this is following up the immense success that this team had with Stray Dogs, which was like a psychological thriller, but through the eyes of dogs, like kidnapped dogs from victims, from murder victims. This one is solely from the cat's point of view, and it's like a zombie tale. It totally is, but there's this like rabies plague going around, and it just... Even though this book is awesome, right? First of all, you got great covers, right? Especially some of the homage horror movie covers, and that was something that Stray Dogs was popular for. But this book, it does take all of those typical zombie story tropes, and it plays around with them, but of course from the perspective of cats, right? But what's really cool is that it still has the impact. Now, I am a huge fan of zombie fiction, so much so that I kind of got over it a long time ago, especially in the heyday of The Walking Dead. It was like zombies here, zombies there. So even though it's about cats and it's from a team that I trust, I was a little bit nervous and hesitant about this book at first for another ongoing zombie type story, but man, it works. It hits all of those emotional beats, and Tony Fleece as a writer, he knows these tropes, he knows what horror fans expect, so he knows how to deliver on expectations and at the same time subvert those expectations in a very brutally tragic way. I love this book and what they're doing with the artwork. So Trish Forstner is drawing all of the cats, and then Tone Rodriguez is drawing everything else. And it gives it this really cool Don Bluth, like Disney animation type feel where the backgrounds feel very real and textured. And then the foregrounds are a little bit more flat, but of course a very expressive nature to the cats and the line work there. This book blew me away from page one. It continues to do so, continues to tug on my heartstrings. It makes it one of the best books of the year. At number 16, Savage Sword of Conan from Titan Comics. Yo, this book has really been a surprise to me. It takes me back to the days when I would sneak into my stepdad's closet to pull out his Savage Sword of Conan books. Sex, violence, muscles, all of that and more are present in the current iteration of the book. Titan's been doing a great job with their Conan books. Conan the Barbarian by Jim Zub and company is really great as well. But this one works for me because of the nature of the book. It's like an anthology book. You can kind of jump into any single issue. There's only been like one story that went from one issue into the other one, and that's in the two most recent issues, but I love it. Great black and white artwork from some amazing artists, some really great stories, including some from Jim Zub himself. I really love Savage Sword of Conan. It brings me back to when I was a kid, but at the same time, it's nice, it's chunky, it's definitely it's one of the most valued comics out there for me, because for its price, you get a lot of content that's really great. I was never necessarily the hugest Conan fan, but after 2024 and this book in particular, I definitely am. At number 15, Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees from IDW. Yo, this book came out at the end of last year and took a lot of us by surprise, and it finished in an absolutely splendid fashion here in 2024. This was a book written and illustrated by Patrick Horvath that it's about a serial killer. It's a book about a serial killer in a small community, and then somebody else starts killing people in this small community, which makes our serial killer realize that, oh, they're going to start putting things together. This implicates me, possibly. I got to go take care of business. But it's all animals. They're all cute little animals. Like our main character, the serial killer, is this cuddly teddy bear type thing, right? So the juxtaposition between the art and the macabre and dire nature of the story, it works so well. Now, other people try to do this, and it doesn't necessarily always work. It does work in cases like books like Feral, for instance, and it works so exceptionally well here. And Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, it never loses sense of the dark reality and undertone of the story, and it never loses sense of the art style. It's dense, it's complex, it's such a great read, and it's one of the best books from the end of last year and the beginning of this year. At number 14, Wonder Woman from DC Comics. I know, I'm thinking the same thing. When Tom King's Wonder Woman run first started, I was so against it. I did not like the first issue. They started winning me over with issue number 3 or so, then they lost my interest, but now, lately, it's become one of my favorite DC reads out there. It is spectacular. I think it's such a great book. I love that Tom King is the way that Tom structures a story, not just issue to issue, but page to page. There is very much an artistic sensibility there that works so well. And paired up with Daniel Samperi on the artwork is amazing. Clean lines, really great stuff, detailed backgrounds. It all works. I've loved this story with the Sovereign, which is actually the Sovereign, this is the villain of the story, is basically the unknown king of America, right? And he's got a lasso of lies to, of course, go against Wonder Woman's lasso of truth. This book has had some big moments. It's introduced the daughter of Wonder Woman, Trinity, and everything I rolled my eyes about at the beginning of this run, I am all here for now. Like, I'm eating my words. I love this book. It's one of my favorites. Every time it comes out, I get excited to read it. At some point, I'm expecting not to enjoy it as much as I do. But in fact, my love for the book just strengthens issue to issue. So Wonder Woman makes the list, and it makes the list because it deserves to be here. At number 13, Ultimate Spider-Man from Marvel Comics. Hey kids, look, it's a Marvel comic on my top 20 list, and it's pretty high up, 13, right? But Ultimate Spider-Man is no surprise to anybody that it would be on this list. It's a great book. It's written by Jonathan Hickman. Most of the art's done by Marco Cicchetto. The artwork is great. The story is great. It's a different iteration of Spider-Man. This is a Peter Parker who didn't get the spider powers when he was a teenager. He gets them in his 30s, right? So it's a really interesting take on Peter Parker. He's married to Mary Jane. They've got 2 kids, but he feels like there's something missing in his life. And then he's introduced the idea that he should have been Spider-Man because in this Ultimate reality, the Maker, which is an evil Reed Richards from the previous Ultimate reality, has gone through and meticulously made sure that no superheroes are around to stop him from molding and crafting this universe into his own likeness, right? It's still, though, at the core of it is a Spider-Man book. The relationship between Peter and Mary Jane is absolutely amazing. The dynamic between them and the kids is great. It's really, especially totally tuned in to the idea that, yeah, there are comic book fans that are grown up now, that have kids, that have families, and it's spotlighting that. Then, of course, you still have action. You still got Green Goblin. You got cool villains in there. The way it's playing with the world of this Hickman Ultimate Universe works so well. But to me, the big highlight of the book is Uncle Ben and J. Jonah Jameson. They have such a cool odd couple, grumpy old men kind of dynamic. And the writing is so freaking witty and clever. I love this book. It's one of the best Marvel books out right now. At number 12, Cobra Commander from Skybound and Image Comics. So the Energon universe has been exploding, and it's been one of my favorite things in comics this year. Transformers, Void Rivals, and of course the G.I. Joe books. But of all the G.I. Joe books that released this year, Cobra Commander for me is the standout. It's written by Josh Williamson with artwork by Andrea Milano. Now, Williamson's story is amazing. It's so good. Now, I grew up a bit of a fan of G.I. Joe, but even though I always loved the villains, Destro and Cobra Commander, even I, as a kid, understood that Cobra Commander was kind of a coward, right? He's kind of like a Skeletor type figure, right? Where they talk a lot of shit, but then when the stuff goes down, when the chips are pushed in, they kind of back away, run away, let other people fight their battles for them. Josh Williamson told us that he was not going to allow that iteration of Cobra Commander to exist in the Energon universe, and he totally fulfilled that promise. This is a very menacing and threatening and downright scary version of Cobra Commander. And then you add in Milano's artwork, and it truly is a G.I. Joe comic with a visceral horror tinge to it that I think really helped it excel and propel itself above the rest of the Joe books. All of the Joe stuff is pretty cool, all the lead up into the new G.I. Joe book, but it really starts here in a core book like Cobra Commander for me. The relationship between Cobra Commander and Destro, their interpersonal conflict, the rise of Cobra, you see it all meticulously built brick by brick in the Cobra Commander book in exceptional fashion. At number 11, Ice Cream Man from Image Comics. Ice Cream Man has pretty much had a place on my top books of the year ever since it first debuted, and this year is no exception. Writer W. Maxwell Prince is able to give us an anthology comic book with a little bit of a horror and sometimes a sci-fi tinge to it that at the same time as it's chilling, it is also grounded in hope and optimism. It's a story about life. Right? It's an anthology. You can jump into almost any single issue. They're all self-contained. They're also all innovative. They're all experimental. They're pushing it forward, right? Then you got Martin Morazzo's artwork, which is so great, deceptively simple looking, but very complex in its composition and its layers. I love this book. This year was no exception. We had some standouts, man. We had the spy issue. That was cool. We had the decompression of a car wreck story that was like 2 issues, but each issue was from the perspective of a different vehicle in the middle of a collision, and it was talking about decompression in comic books and in storytelling in general. We had the horror issue, right, where the book was kind of directly talking to the audience about, well, it's not really a horror book. If you think this is horrible, here's what's really horrible. And it was relating it to things in the real world. This book always has an emotional punch to it. It always has a resonating, like a resonating vibe and feel to it when you're done with it. But don't think that the book does get this bad rap of being like just totally depressing and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think that's the case. Some of the best issues of Ice Cream Man show us the horror of existence. But because of the horrible nature of existence, the really good parts are so much more worth it, right? And I think Ice Cream Man really dives into that. It's been a great book ever since it first released, and I think it just has strengthened, and it's still one of the most innovative, experimental, and resonant comics out there today. At number 10, Avengers Twilight from Marvel Comics. What? A Marvel comic in the top 10? Get out of here, but it's true, and I think it's the best Marvel comic of 2024. Avengers Twilight is a futuristic version of the Avengers. It's set out of continuity. It's its own thing, and I really applaud it for that. Marvel doesn't give us a whole lot of out of continuity, not plugged into the Wednesday Warrior type stuff books that can sit there on shelves for years and people can enjoy it. Avengers Twilight's like that. I've heard it be compared to it's the Dark Knight Returns of the Avengers, right? Not necessarily, I wouldn't go that far, but as far as a perennial book that is kind of a masterpiece that can sit on a shelf that you can read and reread over and over and share with people that don't have a giant history with these characters, maybe even just a history with the movies, yeah, it works. Chip Zdarsky nailed it. This is one of the best mainstream superhero comics I've ever read from him. So it's the Avengers in the future. They've been disbanded. Everything's terrible. Red Skull's like running everything. Captain America has to come out of retirement as an old man, bring the team back together, and rise above. And that is exactly what happens in the book. Daniel Acuna's artwork was amazing all the way through. It never let me down. It kept me engaged and excited and enthralled all the way through all 6 issues. And when you read it all together in one great graphic novel collection, it hits even more. It's such a great book. And like I said, Marvel's best book of the year. At number 9 is The Sacrificers from Image Comics. Sacrificers was on this list last year. It continues to just completely be an exceptional and super awesome book. This is written by Rick Remender, and it's a world in which there are gods who demand sacrifices of their people. These sacrifices are their children, right? So you sacrifice one of your children to get the favor of the gods. But what happens when one of these sacrificees realizes it's all a lie, it's all a sham, and then decides to take the power of the gods on for himself and then goes on a crazy mission of revenge? That's what's going on in The Sacrificers right now, and it's told in an explicitly awesome fashion. It's amazing. The book keeps escalating the sense and the danger and the scale and the scope of everything. And then you got the artwork. The artwork is by Max Fiumara, which is amazing. We talked about that last year in particular, but this year there's been another artist that jumps in, Andre Lima Araujo, right? And what's crazy is that if you don't read the name that's of the artist, you don't really notice that the art has changed. It has a consistency to it, a fluidity towards it, right? And I think that's really fantastic because Araujo could do something completely different, but he's not just mimicking the style, he's doing the style of the book. It is such a great book. It continues to just completely surprise me, shock me, and fascinate me. Sacrificers is definitely worth your time. At number 8, we got a tie, but it makes sense. It's The One Hand and the Six Fingers from Image Comics. So these are 2 books that tell 2 sides of the same story. The collection puts them all together because that is the way to read it. Because one book, The One Hand, that's the Ram V. Lawrence Campbell book, is about a detective who's about to retire, and his most famous serial killer case, somebody that he's already put away twice, like a case he's already solved twice, comes back. Now everything he's done is called into question. He has to, before he retires, find out who this third version of this killer is, right? Then you have The Six Fingers, which is written by Dan Waters with artwork by Sumit Kumar. That book is about a dude who's never killed in his life and wakes up one day with the memory of having killed some people. So you get the book the one hand from the perspective of the detective. You get the six fingers from the perspective of the killer. Both books work on their own separately, but when you read them together, a third narrative develops that you only get when you read both of them together. I think that's phenomenal. Ron V, Dan Waters coming together to do something like this that's innovative, experimental, and it works. It totally pays off in the end. And you do get that third narrative. It's like neo-noir, it's futuristic, it's grounded in reality, but at the same time, it's got a fantastical nature to it. Such a great book. Definitely read both of them and read both of them together. Get the trade paperback because it gives you the right reading order. It's such a good book, and it's cool to see people trying to push the medium forward and succeeding. At number 7, Transformers from Image and Skybound Comics. So Transformers made the list last year, and it only had like a couple issues in, right? But it just had that big of an impact to me. It did not drop off at all in 2024. It just intensified, right? The end of the first arc, all by Daniel Warren Johnson, was so freaking epic. It was so awesome. It was great. And then in the second arc, we got the news that there was going to be a different artist, Jorge Corona. Jorge Corona is a really great artist, but I didn't know if he was going to be able to continue that dynamic flow and feel that we get from Daniel Warren Johnson. Yes, he does. It has the grit. It has the texture. It has the dynamic energy of the Daniel Warren Johnson art, but it is still so much distinctly Jorge Corona. And it works. But then just let's go back to that story. Daniel Warren Johnson, this could be easy, right? Just put Optimus Prime versus Megatron, throw some Soundwave and some Starscream, some Cliffjumper, some Bumblebee, do all this kind of stuff. Just tell the same story that everybody else told millions of times. No, that's not what Daniel Warren Johnson's doing. He's telling the core of the story and really diving into it, right? For the first time, I care about the humans in a Transformer story, so that's pretty exceptional. It's a story about war and the effect that war has on the soldiers on all sides. It's incredibly resonant and nuanced. And it's a Transformers book, so it still has those big giant moments when Devastator formed for the first time. I lost my shit, y'all. It gives me that sense of being a kid again. It gives me that sense of why I love comics to begin with. Stories that are so big, so epic, on not just the narrative scale, but on a personal level as well, with the characters that you can only do in comics. Transformers continues to be one of the best. At number 6, Kaya from Image Comics. Simply put, Kaya is one of the best comics on the shelves. Now, I know there are fans of Kaya. I'm one of them, and a bunch of people on the monthly comic book review, we love Kaya, but I feel like this book deserves more love. It really does. It's one of the best all-ages comics I've ever read. I have compared it to the book Bone, and I think that now 23 issues in, it has totally earned that comparison. Bone by Jeff Smith was a great all-ages, for the most part, book that didn't talk down to the audience, doesn't talk down to kids, and this is not a kiddie book. It is a book for everyone. I love Kaya. It's written and illustrated by Wes Craig, and I've been a fan of Wes Craig's for a while, especially books like Deadly Class, but Kaya is Wes Craig's work on a whole other level. The pacing of this book, the composition, the panel designs, the layouts, the flow of the book. It's usually a quick read, but it's always a worthwhile read. And when you read them in chunks in the graphic novels, holy freaking cow. The book is masterful. It is a masterclass in story. It's a masterclass in story. It's a masterclass in comics, in art, in writing, in pace. Everything that you have to do to make a comic is done so exceptionally well in the pages of Kaya, and it's pretty much a one-man operation. So hats off to Wes Craig and Kaya. The book continues to solidify itself as one of the best comics of the last few years. At number 5, Helen of Windhorn from Dark Horse Comics. Helen of Windhorn is an absolutely amazing book, written by Tom King with artwork by Billups Evely. So it's a Tom King book, and I think it's the best Tom King book of the year. The story is so rich, so dense, so layered, and the artwork is gorgeous, exquisite, and it's dense and layered as well. It totally complements the story. The story is about this woman, Helen, who has lost her father. Her father was a fantasy writer, but turns out that all of his writing about this fantasy world and this warrior in this fantasy world is all based in reality. It's based on his father, Helen's grandfather, who is the warrior of a fantasy world. Helen gets introduced to her grandfather and to that fantasy world in this series. The story is told from the eyes and perspective of her governess, somebody who's there to kind of rein the child in, keep her cool, keep her calm, teach her proper manners and all this kind of stuff. But all she wants to do is just drink and be sad and depressed and be miserable and self-destructive. And then she finds out about this fantasy world and she gets wrapped up in it. It is such a beautiful book. Like I said, the art is astounding. It is gorgeous. I think Evely might be one of the artists of the year for this book alone. And Tom King, the writing is very solid. Now, this is the same team of the Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow book, which is being adapted into the new Supergirl movie that's coming from the DCU. That book was all right, but I thought that it was a little bit verbose and it kind of got bogged down by the weight of the verbosity of the book. That is not the case here in Helen of Windhorn. I eat up every single word, every single phrase, every bit of dialogue, every bit of narration. It just flows so freaking well. I think Tom King's getting better at that, and Helen of Windhorn is a big example of that skill from Tom King. But then, of course, Evely's artwork really helps push it to another level. It's one of the best books of the year. At number 4, Absolute Wonder Woman from DC Comics. Now, I know that this book is only 3 issues in, but just 3 issues in, and it's one of my top 5 books of the year. In fact, it's literally number 4, right? I love this book. Out of all the Absolute books, I think this one is the strongest. And this is one of the best takes I've ever seen on Diana. It is very different on paper, but at the same time, it's very true to the root of who Diana is as a person. So in the Absolute universe in DC, Diana is not raised on an island of a sisterhood of Amazons, right? She's raised alone by Circe, who would typically be portrayed as her villain in hell. So it's a Wonder Woman with a little bit more grit, a little bit more darkness, a little bit more magic, right? A little bit more dark magic, right? And the relationship between her and Circe is so freaking amazing. And then they build up the relationship of Steve Trevor and Diana and the sacrificial nature of that was revealed in the latest issue. Such an amazing take on Diana. And even though all that feels different, it still is Diana. This is still the woman who's going to stand her ground. Still the woman who's going to do the right thing. Still the woman who is the dichotomy of the warrior princess and the ambassador for peace. And Kelly Thompson, the writer, completely nails that assignment. Then Hayden Sherman. Hayden Sherman, they're one of the absolute best artists out there. They always shift and change and mold their style. They come up with a different visual vocabulary for each book that they work on. Just compare this, for instance, to Batman Dark Patterns that they just did with Dan Waters. The book is amazing. I love the artwork. It's deceptively simple looking. It's so complex when you look at the composition, the panel design, the layouts of the page, and the story by Kelly Thompson. It's just soaring. For a book to hit this list and only have a couple issues out, that's a big deal. This book has super impressed me. I was already anticipating enjoying it, but not this much. To me, it's one of the books of the year. At number 3, Rare Flavors from Boom Studios. So Rare Flavors was near the top of the list last year as well, and it only had like 2 or 3 issues out. It wrapped up this year in magnificent fashion. Rare Flavors is the story of a demon from like Indian mythology who has left the world of mythology, resides in the real world, and just loves culture, right? He loves food, he loves places, he loves people. And he loves eating people as well, right? So he wants to come up with a show or a documentary in an Anthony Bourdain type style, right? He's inspired by Anthony Bourdain. And writer Ram V was inspired by Anthony Bourdain to do this book, right? So he gets a filmmaker to go along with him and basically film this documentary, but the story goes crazy from that point forward. Like I said, this dude is a cannibalistic demon monster, right? But the book has so much heart and charm, and it is about culture and how culture comes through food and how food is a way to introduce somebody into the culture of a society, right? The book is amazing. Each issue spotlighted a different dish, gave you the recipe, but at the same time, the story somehow reflects the recipe, right? So there's an issue where there's like spicy peppers and stuff like that, but it's kind of about the spice of life, and you have to get burnt to really enjoy life. You have the risk of hurting yourself. It's such a well-crafted book, and it ended in a splendid fashion. Then Felipe Andrade on the artwork, masterful, just exceptional. Fantastic book. I talked a lot about it last year, talked a lot about it throughout this year, and it still maintains at the top. One of my favorite books of 2024. At number 2, Universal Monsters Frankenstein from Image Comics and Skybound. Skybound does it again with one of their Universal Monsters properties. Last year it was Dracula that wowed me. This year it's Frankenstein. This is written and illustrated by Michael Walsh, and just like Dracula before it, it tells a story within the story of the original Universal movie. Right? Now, I love the Universal Monsters. I love the original Frankenstein movie, and this does such a great job of weaving a narrative that in between the different scenes. So you have the big moments. You see the monster come to life. You have the doctor, Henry Frankenstein in the movie, right? You have him doing his whole "it's alive" thing. You have all those big moments, the little girl and the daisies and all that kind of stuff, the flowers. You have all those moments, but the story is actually about this kid. A kid who just recently lost his father, and his father is dug up by Henry Frankenstein, and the hand is used for the monster. So the kid has this like connection to the monster because it's his father's hand, but at the same time is very scared of him. It's such a really great, delicate kind of approach to this book, and it works splendidly well. Michael Walsh's artwork is amazing, and I cannot right now remember the name of the colorist. Tony something, I believe, is her name. I don't remember. The coloring in the book is exceptional. Michael Walsh, though, his panel design, the layout, the composition, these are words that I use a lot in the top 20s because this is what comics are for. Use the page. Use the medium. That's what Michael Walsh and his colorists are doing here in the pages of Universal Monsters Frankenstein. Just 4 issues. It gets in, it gets out. It doesn't disturb your memory of the original movie. In fact, it honors it. It honors that legacy. And like I said, does an exceptionally incredible job of weaving a narrative in between the bits from the movie. It was touching, it was spooky, it was macabre, it was exciting, it was comics the way they should be, especially when it's Universal Monsters. And at number 1, Precious Metal from Image Comics. Precious Metal is a follow-up to the book Little Bird. Now, Little Bird, when it released, was my top book of that year. So it's no surprise to me, or probably to anybody else, that the follow-up is my favorite book this year. It's a prequel. It actually takes place 35 years before the events of Little Bird, and even if you didn't read Little Bird, you can jump in and enjoy this book. It has connections to that world, especially as the series progresses. They start becoming more clear, but honestly, you can read Precious Metal on its own, but why would you? You need to read Little Bird and Precious Metal. You need to read both of these books because it is some of the best comic making I've seen in the last 5 to 10 years. So meticulously crafted on every single level. Basic plot is this. A dude is hired to find this kid, and this is a world, it's futuristic, right? And this is right before America full-on becomes this like theocratic dystopia, right? That's explored in Little Bird, and this is the world a little bit before that. But it's about a dude who's tracked down to hunt this kid. He hunts down this kid. There's other people that are hunting down this kid for different reasons, and he thinks that this kid could be the key to unlocking these memories that he's kind of lost, right? So he's trying to find himself while finding this kid, and it all comes together in a thematic and a resonant way by the end of the book. Darcy Van Poelgeest is the writer. He does an exceptional job yet again with this world, with these characters. There are so many ideas in this book. There are so many ideas that other writers would take and develop a whole 100-issue series based on one of the ideas. These ideas in this book are just background. They're just there. They're just excitingly there for no purpose aside from just to build out the world and enrich the world that Little Bird and Precious Metal take place in, right? I love that because it never loses sight of what the story's core is about, to dive too deep into all the weird, wild, wonky stuff. And when I say weird, wild, wonky stuff, including the technology, I mean it. And the artist, Ian Bertram, does a freaking amazing job of showing us this world. The artwork is incredibly intricate, dense, layered, complex, but at the same time it has room to breathe. It's incredibly detailed, but at the same time it feels almost deceptively simple. It is such an amazing book just on the artwork alone. Giant splash pages, weird creatures, very expressive characters, a great sense of movement on every single page. And like I said, as you read the book, more of those connections to Little Bird become revealed towards the end. It's such an amazing comic book. It's also lettered by Hassan Osman El Hal, one of the best letterers in the game, and amazing colors by Matt Hollingsworth. This is what it's like when you have top talent on each level of the book working on a book that you can feel the passion is there for. This is a book that was made not to sell books, but made for the love of the art of making comics. And you can feel that. It oozes on every page, every word, every panel, every single issue. The book is amazing. It's spectacular. Even if you've never read Little Bird, read Precious Metal. There should be a collection coming out soon. But seriously, get a hold of Little Bird if you missed out on it, because that book's amazing too. A 1-2 punch of awesomeness and a 1-2 punch of picks of the year for Darcy, Ian, and company. All right, well, that's what I got. Those are my top 20 books of 2024. What about you? What are your favorites this year? Let me know in the comments down below. I'm really curious to see what books really hit you this year and you think are worth checking out. All right, 2025 is right around the corner. Weekly comic book reviews, Rockin' Robbie Lives, weekly pop culture wrap-up is returning. All that and more here on the year of PCP X. So get ready, everybody. We're celebrating 10 years of pop culture philosophers all year long with exceptional content, great conversations, and a fantastic and one of the best communities out there. The PCP Army, thank you all so much for making 2024 another slam bang fantastic year. So on behalf of me and on behalf of everybody here at Pop Culture Philosophers, thank you so much. Station, pop, pop, boom!